Good afternoon. Today is Friday, March the 25th, 2016. I'm Brock Jennings.
And I'm Peter Clark, and this is our first attempt at recording stumbling block miles and miles away from each other.
Where are you exactly?
I am currently in Madison, Wisconsin.
Oh, well, I'm in my apartment in St. Paul, Minnesota.
So, we're a few hundred miles away from each other.
And this is preparation for the future, right?
Right, when we will be closer to 1,000 miles away from each other.
Yeah. So, this is kind of strange for me, at least, I think, because we're used to sitting across a table from one another, and we're used to folks not being able to see us, and now folks can see us.
Right, which, we may decide to keep or not keep that. That will be something we examine going forward.
Yeah, so we'll see how this goes. Let us know if you guys want to see us with video, or if you want to just hear us, or how you want to do this. I have to say I'm a little dismayed to note I can't wear my headphones because one of my cats ate through the headphone cord, and I haven't bought a new one yet.
Here, then, is the power of Bluetooth headphones.
Well, yes, but then I would have to spend money to buy the Bluetooth headphones.
Yes, you would. This is true. And we all know that I am the one of the two of us that spends money on technology.
Yes, I spend very little money on technology.
Yeah. So it's Good Friday. We are, today is the day when we celebrate the death of our Lord. That's weird.
I'm not quite sure how one would celebrate that, but yes.
Right? I mean, that's what I'm saying. Is this sort of like, it's we call it Good Friday, which is, I have to admit, it always struck me as a little weird growing up, and people would, well, it's good because, through Christ's death and resurrection, we are saved, and, there are enough pietists out there, we don't want to call it, Shitty Friday, but... Yeah, so there's that. I don't know. What do you think?
Church for Good Friday?
I am not going to church for Good Friday. We have a new puppy here at the house, and it's also my wife's birthday. So we had a little brief celebration for that over lunch, and then we're trying to leave the puppy home alone as little as possible, doing some crate training, so that people will be able to go out on other days. I myself will be playing bass at an Easter Vigil service tomorrow night, and that will be my sort of observance of Easter weekend.
Going to church on Easter Sunday?
Probably not. Most years when I do Easter Vigil, I don't do Easter Sunday. That will obviously change once I'm a pastor and I have to do both. But in general, we choose one of the two, and with a 5-year-old and a puppy, it's a lot easier to do Easter Vigil than Easter morning.
Well, you can always skip the Easter Vigil. Isn't that one optional?
Theoretically, I actually find it more, in many ways, more meaningful than the Easter Sunday service.
Sure.
Because the whole...
Personally, I like Good Friday better than all of them.
Oh man, Good Friday's good. I normally go to a Good Friday service, but this year we're not at home and dealing with other concerns.
Sure. Yeah, I haven't decided if I'm going to Good Friday service tonight or not. I went last night for Maundy Thursday, and it was wonderful. But I haven't decided about what Good Friday looks like. A lot of reading, as always. So, and I need to be more productive than I was this morning.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so there's an
I
interesting thing
decided that
to sort
drinking
of.
10 cups of coffee was a good idea.
Well, those are the decisions that seminary drives one to.
What,
Um,
coffee or work?
but no, well, drinking 10 cups of coffee. That sounds like a good idea when you're in seminary.
I have an internet connection problem.
Yeah, no, I can. We've got a little lag going on here, but nothing insurmountable. I do think let's talk about though the whole concept of the 3-day feast of Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter Vigil as they lead into to Easter. Let's talk some about the theology and the traditions behind that. I don't know how many people know this, but Maundy Thursday is traditionally the date that people would take their first communion.
Oh, really? I thought it was Easter.
No. Easter is when you were. So okay, so here let me lay this all out for you. The whole tradition behind this. Maundy Thursday, the celebration of the Last Supper, is when you traditionally take your first communion.
Uh-huh.
Right, and then Good Friday is sort of, it's just Good Friday. You don't do anything special on Good Friday, lest that interrupt our reflection upon the death of our Lord. Easter Vigil is traditionally the date when new converts to the faith would be baptized. So
okay,
then,
yep, I knew that.
So what would happen is you'd be baptized on Easter Vigil, spend a year in catechesis and study of the new faith you have chosen to be baptized into. And then on the following Maundy Thursday, you would receive your first communion and then be presented to the church on Easter Sunday as a full member of the body of Christ.
And to think, I was just arguing last night that because Judas communed, we should commune everyone.
That broke up a little bit, but I think you were saying that because we communed Jesus communed Judas, we should commune everyone.
Yes. Everyone should have the opportunity to commune with Jesus if Judas could.
An interesting argument. I'm not making a statement one way or the other in terms of the tradition, but that's that's just what the tradition is. And I think in a certain way, I really like some of the traditions of the church. I believe in infant baptism, but the church I interned at did First Communion on Maundy Thursday, and I found that really meaningful, because then it creates the opportunity for you to preach about the Last Supper and what that meant for the disciples and what it means for us to celebrate, communion and the Eucharist and to join together as community together. Which, Judas was at that point in time still part of the community of the apostles at the Last Supper. Whether or not, various people will argue to various degrees whether or not he was functioning as a member of that community, but he was, prima facie a member of the 12 apostles at that time. And then baptizing people gives the Easter Vigil service a driving point.
Right.
Right. The adult converts
Sure.
baptized on Easter Vigil. Which, obviously if someone is in a real hurry to get baptized or whatever, I'm not going to deny them that as a pastor.
Right.
But I think there is a value in the tradition and a value in, this connection to the generations of Christians that have come before us.
And then there's me. I don't even want to have an Easter Vigils. So there we go.
Why not? Why not?
Oh, I don't know. You stay up until all hours, and then you have to get up for Easter Sunday anyway, and you're asking the people of your community to attend, and I don't know. I did vigils my first 3 years as part of this whole thing, and didn't really care for them any time I did them. I liked lighting the thing on fire. The fire pit was fun.
Fire is always fun.
The stories of the Exodus, reading the story of the Exodus, and then connecting that to the story of the dried bones and everything, that was good. But I don't know. It just seemed it never resonated with me, honestly.
Yeah, it could be done really badly, and I think one of the reasons that it doesn't resonate with people a lot today is that the service is supposed to drive towards the baptism of the new adult converts for the year. And when you don't have that, when you're not doing that, it's more of a denouement than a climax to the service.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that the services I was a part of were done badly. I'm sure they were done very well. And I was involved in all of those. One year I preached, and one year I assisted in some other way. I don't know. It's all kind of blurring together. I just never the 3 days. The notion of the 3 days never has really resonated with me. But I'm not. I'm not sure why that is. The patterns of it don't work, or I don't know. It just doesn't really do it for me.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is just because being a leader in some of that, it's so stressful that I'm just not interested in being stressed about how a worship goes.
Right, and I guess that's probably the difference between you as a systematician and me as a liturgist. I'm not stressed by that. I am invigorated, enthused, excited by that. That is, I can't think of anything that I was more excited about in terms of our elementary school kids than participating in their first communion. I got to preach, actually, at that Maundy Thursday service, which was a good and a bad. I really got to participate in the lives of these kids, and I loved that, and got to, plan out the service and shape it the way I wanted to, but I had to miss an OK Go concert to do that, which, sucked. But, yeah.
The preaching's great. I'm not arguing about the preaching. Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry. This is the hard part, folks, of us being so far away from each other.
Yeah, we'll get used to this over time. But for me, it's not the preaching so much as I love planning the worship and executing the worship and tying everything together, tying the hymns to the preaching, to the event, to the focus of the feast day and things like that are really one of the things that excite me most about being a pastor.
Okay. As far as the hymns would go, I think I would take great precision in making sure that the hymns that are chosen are theologically sound, and that they're evangelical. That is something, and I told my candidacy committee that I made a promise in my approval interview, that the congregation that calls me will get theologically sound hymns.
Just make sure they're singable too.
Well, I'm a musician. They'll be singable.
Okay.
But that is something that I will do, hands down. I make that promise because I think one of the ways we communicate the gospel is through the hymns we choose. But worship planning, I hate it. I despise it. I'd rather do anything else but that. It's not that I think it's beneath me. It's that I never know what I'm doing. I don't care enough as to how the structure of it goes. I'm more concerned that the hymns are theologically sound. And that's a big problem right now, I think, in our churches, as we get these crappy hymns that are Jesus is my boyfriend music. And then say nothing about the gospel. But yeah, I struggle with worship planning a lot. I really do.
Right. And, like I say, that's sort of one of my gifts and one of my areas of passion is worship planning. So I love the 3-day feast because I'll tie the whole thing together. I'll have, a hymn or two that runs through the whole thing and ties everything together. And you can tell I'm already sort of geeking out a little bit.
Will you come to Alaska and co-pastor with me, and we'll have decently done services?
No,
Why not?
because first off, I don't think that there's any church in Alaska with enough budget for 2 first call pastors.
Okay, fair enough.
So,
Now, let me just say, though, it's not that I would want to do sloppy liturgies or anything. I don't
no,
mean
no,
that.
no. I get what you're saying. That what, and it's like when you get excited about reading Tillich or things like that. What for you is a challenge, for me is a joy, and vice versa. You know, I find reading systematicians to be very challenging. It's a necessary part of what I do as a pastor and as a theologian, but it's very challenging for me. Whereas for you, it's a joy. Whereas planning the liturgy, sketching out a worship outline, coming up with new ideas and things like that for worship is a challenge for you, but for me, it's a joy. And that's different strengths that we have as people and as pastors. Hi, Sam. Do you want to come say hi to Barack?
Hi. How are you?
That's my son Sam. He can't hear you because I have the headphones on.
Oh, well then I'll stop talking to him.
He's helping my mom get ready for. We're having some guests over for dinner this evening.
Sure.
So to help celebrate Kate's birthday.
Yeah, I think that's, and happy birthday to Kate. I think that's an important thing to realize is where one places the accents on one's ministry is going to shape what that looks like. Mm-hmm. You know,
well, it's going to be shaped by who you are as a person too. I mean, let's not forget the very reason I decided to get into the ministry. The first thing that drew me to my call back in high school was cantering.
Okay.
When I found out in the Episcopal Church that in most churches to cantor, you had to at least be an ordained deacon.
Huh?
Then I was like, okay, well, I don't do things in half measures. I don't want to go through the process of becoming an ordained deacon. I'll go through the process of becoming an ordained priest eventually. And then, you know, I became a Lutheran and, you know, eventually kept becoming later and later. And then now here I am. But, so.
You have to be a deacon to be a cantor, but what if you don't have a music background?
Well, they teach you that stuff in seminary.
Oh, see, I think at least at PLTS, we didn't have really anything to do with specifically church music. We had liturgics courses, but nothing specifically in church music. You could pay for outside chant instruction if you wanted, but it wasn't part of the curriculum.
Yeah, well, at Luther, in our worship classes, we all had to cantor through every setting in the book.
What happens if you can't sing?
Then you cantor badly. And you sort of know that. I mean, part of the whole point is to know whether you're a decent cantor or not, right? And in the Lutheran Church, you don't have to be ordained to cantor. But there are churches that will expect you to. And you need to know whether that's something that's going to be a struggle or something relatively easy and a blessing for you. I find cantering relatively easy. There were people in my class who did not, and I, volunteered to work with them and help them make it through some of that stuff. And there are a couple people who came out of worship class just being like, all right, well, they better not send me to a church that cantors every Sunday.
I mean, I guess just as a singer, I never struggled with that. The chanting or whatever that I did was old hat in the sense of familiar territory.
Yeah, but I think that not making people do it in seminary is actually a disservice, because then they might end up at a church that expects the pastor to do it, and if they've never done it, they don't know if they're any good at it or not.
Well, we had to do it in the sense of in the worship class that I did, we did have to chant and or sing the proper preface and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just saying there wasn't an extensive emphasis on church music.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no. Under my program, we had to take at least one hymnody course. That's
Hmm.
changed under the new program. You don't have to anymore. And we had to take a worship course. Actually, if for people a few years before me, before they changed the curriculum, you had to and sort of before they made exceptions for the people who were trapped between, they had to take a hymnody course and two worship courses. So there's a high emphasis. That's one of the reasons that I chose Luther, was the balance of academics and practicum.
Yeah, but I would think hymnody would be on the academic side.
Well, it's both.
Yeah, both.
I took two hymnody courses because I'm nuts.
Yeah, well.
I took a complete history of hymnody from the first century through the 19th.
I just spilled my water.
I'm
Sorry.
sorry.
Well, fortunately, my Tillix systematics is unharmed.
There you go. That's the important thing.
But it almost got water doused on it, which would have been very devastating.
I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if Tillich could use a rebaptism.
Why?
You walked into that one. No, I just had to say that. It was just, I was just
No.
being an ass.
Okay, well, sure. That's fine. That's fine. Yeah, that's all about emphasis. I guess. I mean, I have a music degree, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the I guess I just see, as far as church work, that music is so much part of what I will do. I mean, that's why I'm so concerned with theologically sound hymns.
Mm-hmm.
It's because the text should serve the music, right?
Yeah.
And vice versa. The music can serve the text. That there's this interplay between the two of them. So as far as liturgy goes, if I thought liturgically in any way, it's really from the musical side of things.
Mm-hmm.
I think, at least, but I don't know. I haven't thought about it enough. This is the easiest Holy Week I've ever had, and probably the easiest one I ever will have.
Probably. Like I say, there's a part of me that's, raring to go and just sort of like, I want to do more. I want to be participating in more services and blah, but it's just not happening for various reasons. Normally, most years during Holy Week, if I were back in the Twin Cities, which sort of has been on and off over the past few years, someone would have grabbed me to play a couple services over the weekend. I'd have participated in the service at Humble Walk. And all that, and I would be heavily participating in the 3-day feast. Maybe not all at one church, but at various. And that's, as I always, as I tell people, and as I told my candidacy committee, they ask me, well, how will you deal with being a pastor and not really being able to just go to a worship service on a Sunday, but having to, actively participate in it. And I said, well, that is how I worship. I worship from the front. So much of my life I've spent doing music and things like that, that I worship from the praise band pit, or I worship from the lectern. To me, that is my worship. That's the use of my skills and the use of my passions to glorify God, is to worship from up front, and that's part of why I'm a liturgist.
So would you think about going on and getting an MA in liturgics?
I don't know. Maybe eventually. First things first. Got to get through those first 3 years in Iowa. Not scare the pietists too much.
Good luck.
Right? Oh, yeah.
So you worship from up front. That's an interesting way to look at it.
Mm-hmm. And I know not everyone does. I know some people, really like to step back and just be a part of the congregation. But I never really think of myself as separate from the congregation up front.
Sure.
That's just, maybe that's, my extroversion and my theater background and things like that. But if I'm in the congregation, it's going to be impossible for me to turn off that side of my brain that's analyzing how I would have done things, or,
right.
It's the sound guys, all these different things that go through your brain, that I can turn off when I'm up front doing it.
I suppose maybe I worship from up front. I've never really thought about it.
Well, I mean, by necessity, most pastors kind of have to learn to.
Yeah, you have to learn to, or you don't get filled.
Yeah, that's why I know a number of pastors who once a month go to an evening service at a different church or something like that. Humble Walk doesn't have this to the extent that they used to. But back when we were in the Acme Arts building, there are a number of pastors, about 3 or 4, who would every couple weeks or every month or so come to worship at Humble Walk because it was an evening service, and they could just sort of sit in the back and just be congregants because they weren't the pastor to anyone at the congregation.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't wear their collar to worship, so unless you knew the local pastorate, you didn't even know they were a pastor. A couple of them I didn't even know were pastors until I ran into them at a tech study.
That's a good way to find out, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And so that was, but those are people who needed that kind of, they needed to be preached to.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They needed to have the liturgy sort of aimed at them.
Aimed at them.
I mean, there's probably a better way to say that. That's just sort of what came out.
Sure.
But to be the to sort of be more passive rather than more active in the execution of the liturgy.
Yeah, somebody said that, to me, if you're a pastor, you're a liturgist.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, oh God, I hope not. Or I'm going to be a very bad pastor. It's not that I don't lead worship well. I do. I think I do. I got positive reports from my internship reviews and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to lead worship with both a poise and a confidence and a lightheartedness that didn't take it too seriously. But, yeah, I just don't. For me, being a pastor is synonymous with being a theologian. And that's what I'm really concerned with, is that, this unique way of articulating the gospel that we have as Lutherans gets communicated as imperfectly as it's going to get communicated, but, that it gets out there. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess sort of I have kind of a I would say, triune, but it's really more of a modalist understanding of the pastors, but it's a tripartite understanding of the pastorate, which is, as a pastor, you are your 3 things, and you have to balance those 3 things, and we'll all balance them slightly differently. You're a preacher. That's where being a theologian comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You have to be able to be a theologian to declare the gospel, and to declare the gospel, you have to understand the theology behind it. You are a counselor. You're the shepherd to your flock, walking with them in times of trouble and difficulty. I know that I put a little more accent on the with them than some other people might like. I'm not going to walk you through your grief. I'm going to walk with you. through your
Yep.
grief. I'm going
Yep.
to grieve with you.
Yep.
And third is a liturgist. A person who understands the traditions and practices of the church. A historian, in a way.
And is this the way you learned that at Luther Seminary?
No, this is just sort of my own piecing together.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of people at Luther Seminary who will tell you that a pastor is a preacher, is a pastor is a preacher.
Yeah, I think the first thing that we're entrusted to when we get ordained to such an office is the notion of care of souls. You termed that in terms of counselor.
Mm-hmm.
I have been taught that a pastor is absolutely not a therapist.
Well, that's why I use the word counselor.
Okay, and then in the same breath, I heard therapist and counselor used interchangeably in Berkeley.
Right, which is it's a language thing, and I don't like. It's difficult because of language, as you know, is difficult. Vis-a-vis our signs and symbols discussions throughout forever. But I'm using counselor as one who provides counsel.
Okay, sure. No,
Right.
that makes sense. That makes sense.
Just as my father and mother are counselors to me.
Sure.
Right. But not my therapist. And
I
no,
think my
a
cats are
pastor
my
should
counselors.
not be a therapist. Unless they are a certified therapist. Of which there are some.
What's wrong?
Oh, nothing. I was just saying that a pastor should not be a therapist unless they are actually a certified therapist, of which there are some.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I don't think. Well, I agree with you what you're saying. I just think that if I had to be a liturgist, if I had to get out books and read how the earliest communities prayed or all of that, I just don't think I would be effective. If I had to be a liturgical scholar, let's put it that way.
Right. And that's why we have, the ELW and the hymnals and stuff like that. That's why we have, pre-prepared, easily used resources.
Right. Those are very, very helpful.
Yeah. They are.
And I like the ELW. There's some controversy in the Anglo-Catholic wing of Lutheranism, I guess, about the ELW, but I quite like it.
I do too. But again, I never really. I'm such a Lutheran come lately. I'm unfamiliar with anything besides the ELW.
Right.
I do find it interesting, coming from an Episcopal background, that the Lutherans have their prayer book and their hymnal in the same book. To me that limits both the prayer book and the hymnal. But that's the tradition, and I understand that's the tradition, and it has to do with, basically with rural churches that can only afford so many resources.
Right.
So
Peter,
go ahead.
Can we switch gears for just a second?
We sure can.
You were going to give me a hard time about a certain thesis topic on our podcast.
I was. So, Brock Jennings here has decided that he is going to do his thesis topic, if it gets approved, on reading Paul Tillich queerly. Which, as I put the other day, that just kind of represents so much of what I dislike about systematics. This whole notion of attaching adjectives to theology. That may be coming out of a place of privilege, that may be coming out of a place of having seen too many people argue for a certain understanding of theology that doesn't take that tries to become monolithic. But there it is.
Well, and as I told Peter the other day, you know, when you're in graduate school, you have to specialize in something, or you never get the writing done.
Fair enough.
You know, you can't really, in an academic research degree, you can't really be a generalist when it comes down to writing the thesis.
Yeah, I know.
And at least in the MTH program, I'm expected to do something unique. Not as unique as a doctoral work would be, but
right.
You know, something that moves the scholarship along just a little bit. So it's not a reproduction of existing research, if that makes sense.
Right, which again sort of like is one of the questions and concerns that I continually have as regards theology as a subset of academia, which is that, you know, I don't know that everyone needs to move the research or the church forward necessarily, but that, you know, perhaps there might be a value in understanding where the church is.
Well, and I think that's part of it. You know, when you do courses on church history and when you do research in church history and all of that. And I, too, am a little skeptical about, you know, if I were to do a doctorate someday, what on earth would I do it on, you know? And I have no idea, which is one of the reasons why I've really tabled the idea of doing doctoral work in theology, at least at this point.
Yeah.
I'm intellectually satisfied with my Master of Theology program. I'm getting everything I wanted and then some, you know.
Well, that's good. That's good. I'm glad to hear that.
But the notion of... So I want to read Paul Tillich from a queer perspective. And what I mean by that is I want to use Tillich's insights, and particularly I assume it's going to be in his Christology, to empower the LGBT community. That this can be a way that LGBTQ folks can affirm their full humanity and be a part of Christianity when they're so often excluded. When we, and now I speak as a member of that community, are so often excluded. I think there are some gems in Tillich that will be very, very helpful in that.
And I look forward to hearing about that. I really, really, truly do. And like I said, I gave you some crap about it at first, but the more you explained where you were going with this, sort of the less uncomfortable I became with it. And the more I think it fits who you are as a person and as a scholar. You know, at the end of the day, I'm not a systematician. I am a liturgist, and as part of being a liturgist, I am a church historian.
Right.
And that's sort of where my perspective tends to come from.
And I think the interesting thing, well, one of the interesting things, at least about systematic theology, is you're always in dialogue with church history, right? You're in dialogue with the biblical narrative. You're in dialogue with church history. You're in dialogue with culture,
right?
And all of these are sources with which you draw upon, as one is attempting to explain the gospel and to proclaim the gospel. And that's why I keep saying that it's both apologetic and charismatic, that they go together.
Right.
But for me, Tillich is the bridge between Karl Rahner and Jürgen Moltmann on the one hand, and Luther, as in the theologian, Luther and the contemporary world on the other. So that's why I'm doing my thesis on Tillich and not on Luther, because Luther works in a 16th century framework. Well, that doesn't really help me.
Right, no, understood.
Whereas Tillich is, you know, from a historian's perspective, Tillich is yesterday. You know, Tillich is contemporary from a historical perspective, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right.
But from a theological perspective, he needs some updating and some massaging and all of that to speak to this particular community, because obviously the issue of queer theology did not exist in his day. No,
not explicitly anyway.
Not explicitly, no. But he can be used as somebody with some answers and some insight. Not that anything's perfect, of course, but I think he can be a rich resource for LGBTQ folks who want to be in the church but don't know how to be.
Okay. That's fair enough. And like I say, I look forward to hearing more about this. We need to wrap our recording up here. We're at about 42 minutes now, so we should probably call it a day.
It always ends so quickly.
I know. You and I will continue to talk a little bit more about this because I have some news to update you on that our wider population. Hi, Sam. Sam wants to say hi again. There you go. There we go. That our wider listening audience doesn't necessarily need to hear about. But until next week, do let us know what you thought of this. If this works, if you like the sound, audio quality and things like that from the recording, email us at stumblingblockedpodcast@gmail.com. But until next week, I'm Peter Clark.
And I'm Brock Jennings.
And this has been Stumbling Block.